This is India Tonight. I'm Nivedna Prabhu, and our top focus on the show today. As the world's attention shifts to Israel's strikes on Iran, Iranian state media says there has been a fresh Israeli attack, showing a large plume of smoke rising after an explosion in the northwestern city of Tabriz. Now, as per updates, 8 more people were killed in the fresh attacks, taking the death toll to 78. Let's also tell you, as we are tracking this, in the latest we learn Iran has suspended all domestic and international flights. The country's state-affiliated Fast News agency reported the same, citing the Civil Aviation Authority. Remember, Israeli strikes continued this morning across different cities, including Tabriz, Kermanshah, Hamadan, Shireen, Kangavar. State media reported the same. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will also speak with Trump, said reports, and air alerts issued across northern Israel. Meanwhile, let's tell you, Netanyahu also spoke to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and briefed him about the evolving situation in the region, and quoting the same by having stated that I shared India's concerns and emphasized the need for early restoration of peace and stability in the region. This is exactly which was posted. In fact, you're seeing that particular post on your screens at the moment of Prime Minister Modi's account as well. As we, of course, look at how the world is also reacting to the same, let me take the opportunity to introduce both my guests joining us this evening on ET Now. Professor Stephen Zunes, Director, Middle Eastern Studies, University of San Francisco, as well as I'm given to understand Anurag Singh as well, Managing Partner, Ansett Capital. Good evening, both of you. Thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here. Professor, let me begin with you. With Israel's strike into Iranian territory, do you believe we've crossed into a new phase, possibly edging to a direct regional war?
It's very possible, and it was so avoidable as well. I mean, Iran had signed an agreement with 6 other countries, confirmed by the United Nations, that would have made it physically impossible for them to develop any kind of nuclear weapon. But the under the first Trump administration, with the support of Israel, the U.S. backed off on this agreement, and so Iran started building up its nuclear capabilities. But this has now been used as an excuse to go to war. So this is not about non-proliferation. This is not really about stopping Iran's nuclear program. This is an illegal act of aggression. This is a thing about asserting U.S. and Israeli hegemony in the region, and it can only lead to a greater backlash and encourage radicals and extremists who are appalled by this double standard, whereas the U.S. insists that Israel gets to have nuclear weapons, but Iran can't even have a civilian nuclear program that might have in the future some kind of military application.
You know, as you pointed out, Trump and Netanyahu colluding, even as political reports in recent past have tried to portray, in fact, that all is not well between the two, Professor?
Yes, well, there were some indications that Trump did not support an immediate Israeli strike, that he did want to see if the talks could get anywhere. And there's no evidence that there was direct U.S. military support, such as refueling planes supporting the Israeli airstrikes. But at the same time, the Trump administration has not objected to what is going on, and there's no threats of withholding the weaponry that Israel's been using for these attacks. And Republicans and even some Democratic leaders in Washington have overtly supported these attacks. So while Trump might have preferred it to be done at a different time in a different way, or even possibly avoid altogether, he's clearly not objecting to what is going on and not doing anything to stop it. I mean, if he did not want this to happen, he could have said, we will not let you happen. We will not let you do this, because the United States has enormous leverage on Israel, given their dependence on U.S. military aid.
Right. In fact, Professor, as you point that out, we in fact just put that reaction of Donald Trump as well on our screens. We'll play that once again. But as you make those opening remarks, let me get in a word in from Anurag. Anurag, oil, in fact, has spiked nearly 8%. So if you're looking at the market aspects of this in the last 48 hours, how long can prices stay elevated before we start seeing ripple effects perhaps on global inflation?
So look, I think markets worry about uncertainty more than anything else, correct? So in some sense, I think once the tariff wars were behind us, and so it seemed as of now, I think markets were very much prepared to take the next leap. And I think even on this war, I think as the market indicates right now, aside of a little bit of ripple on the oil, I think market is willing to move on. Aside, let me also, make a distinct point on the war. Look, there are, and with due respect, Professor made his point, but I think even US has pretty divided views on the issue, depends on who you speak to. So, in one ways, market might see this as a culmination of the uncertainty that has been on the horizon for the last many years, that Iran effectively is quite close to developing a nuclear weapon. Limited point on nuclear weapons is they are a great deterrent, but as long as they are only in the right hands. And I think people like me, people from the markets and people from businesses, they worry a lot when the nuclear weapons go into the wrong hands. And I think weapons with Iran is precisely the wrong hands that markets worry about. So I think while there can be a view about what is a civilian nuclear program and a peaceful nuclear program, I don't think there is great amount of trust that the business community places on, when countries like Iran say that it's only a civilian nuclear program. So in some sense, I think there is, and I represent the opposite side of it clearly, that market is relieved that at least, this kind of budding nuclear deterrent is kind of now will be put to rest. Iran, by the way, I'm just speaking from Wall Street Journal's opinion. I think Israel has done it twice to make the world a safer place. They did that in 1981 with the Iraq nuclear program. They did that in 2007 with the Syrian nuclear program. And they did this for the third time now with the Iranian nuclear program. A lot of people would agree with me that they are making the world a safer place. But I understand that there can be two views about it. It doesn't it doesn't impact inflation at all. Let me be clear about that.
Sorry, that's not true at all. The bomb in 1981 of the bombing of the
All right,
Iraq reactor
also
led Iraq to dramatically escalate.
Professor, would you want to come in and counter that?
Yes, please. That's untrue on several levels.
Yes,
First
Professor,
of all, the
go
1981 bombing of the Iraq reactor in Iraq led Saddam Hussein to dramatically escalate his nuclear development. It had just the opposite effect. And in Syria, they were nowhere close to having, this is a very early experimental nuclear work. They were nowhere near a nuclear capability. And if Israel really wants to prevent Iran from having a bomb, why didn't they support the JCPOA, which made it physically impossible for them to do it? I mean, there is an agreement in effect
but
that
Professor,
was being
as you of course speak about that in the counter of what Anurag was saying.
Why not keep this?
Right,
Why
I have
not
to interject you there because we have limited time. So I would also want your viewpoint, Professor, on how likely, just talking about what's currently happening in terms of the next step, right? How likely, in your opinion, is that Iran now retaliates overtly? Do you expect a more calibrated proxy-led response, in your opinion, Professor?
It's hard to say. I mean, obviously, Iran has already sent a number of missiles into Israel. It's very possible that some of their proxy forces in Iraq and elsewhere may attack U.S. positions, given the U.S. role in all this. There really is that possibility. I mean, Iran is an extremely reactionary regime. They have supported these horrific groups in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Iraq and elsewhere, and they're definitely capable of doing damage. And this is just an illustration that when governments like Israel, the United States, insist on going military means to try to resolve issues that could be resolved diplomatically, it creates the risk of a much wider war and greater human suffering.
Professor Stephen, as you also say that, they've lost scientists, they lost the chief of Revolutionary Guard. Iran at this point seems completely defenseless. Is that the way you look at it?
Well, certainly, despite Iran's large size relative to Israel, Israel's always been far more powerful. Indeed, the Saudis and even the Emiratis have larger armed forces than Iran does. So this idea that, though again, they're a very nasty regime, oppressive to their own people and can, again, support destabilization in other countries, they're not really a threat. And as some have tried to the region in the ways they've often been portrayed. So there's not a lot that Iran can do militarily. This is a one-sided, very much of a one-sided asymmetrical conflict. The problem is that when you have such asymmetrical conflicts, it often encourages irregular military actions, including terrorism. And again, this is why I think it's very important to go back to the bargaining table, the diplomatic effort, and not try to resolve this issue militarily.
All right, Professor. In fact, as you point that out, let me also go back to Anurag. Anurag, the other aspect that we're looking at is the crude oil perspective, because it seems to be behaving more like a geopolitical barometer than a commodity.
Correct. Yeah, so look, I think one thing we can be sure of after the regime change in US, which is that at least for the next 4 years, oil will not spike beyond a range, right? There's a range of, between 60 to 90. Anything above that is, detrimental to the markets and economy in general. I think generally the policy of this administration also is that let the oil flow, and energy is a core requirement even within US. Look, all the EV mandates are also being done away, and that can only work if the oil continues to be cheaper as it is, right? So once we get past this short-term blip, of course, Iran's supply is about, I think, less than 2% of the global oil, officially, unofficially. And so that's not a big impact. And I'm sure countries like Saudi Arabia and all are more than willing to compensate if Iranian oil goes off the market, right? So, but that said, I think administration has a very hawk eye on the price of oil, and that should not be a concern. Nevenita, can I, I appreciate, and I think you can understand this is a sensitive issue. I can't be very sure that I'm on the right side of this, and I respect Professor's views. At the same time, I think I also would like to make a point. Look, you to look at it from Israel's point of view, they are in a geography which is, look, it's so safe for me to say sitting here in US that, what is the threat, and it's not as serious or as severe as it is made out to be. But if you're an Israeli sitting within Israel, you know that any of the first, experimentative attack is going to happen on Israel. So in that sense, if they're overcautious and there is a trust deficit within Middle East, I think, we can understand, that it is their skin more in the game than, somebody who is within US, right? So I just wanted to put that out that, it depends on the perspective as well out there.
Israelis actually objected
talking
to
about
this,
your perspective and what you said, Anurag, let's look at this, right? Professor, I'm going to come back to you as you make that point, but just getting a quick word from Anurag again, we're actually putting details out in terms of what the negative impact is in situations like this. Just for our viewers to better understand that, Anurag, how do you look at it? There are multiple factors, of course. On
geopolitics, same, the Israel issue, or the markets, Nevenita?
Right. Markets.
Okay.
And the broader aspect of when you see conflict of this nature happen.
Yeah, look, I think I would express my inability on the geopolitical issues. Look, we were told the Ukraine war will finish in 3 days when it started. And look, here we are, right? It's 3 years and it's not over. So to Professor's point, I think it's easy to initiate these things, but you don't control the end point of it, right? Because then it just reverberates and, it just spirals into something much bigger. And in that sense, I think the point is well taken that diplomacy is the way to go and not wars. And so I think somewhere globally, and I think Trump has issued a statement right now a while back that, Iran should make a deal before nothing is left. It's a kind of it's a threat as well as an offer. But the point is, again, look, the world would prefer transparency. And I don't think anybody can argue that Iran was being fully transparent with the world. Maybe I know less about it, but I think from a market perspective, I think they need to see the end of this uncertainty either ways, right? And I think that's where the whole direction is kind of now moving. Yeah.
Fair enough, Anurag. In a nutshell, of course, you're saying, how you're looking at it, but of course, markets as well. But Professor, you were making a point earlier before I did go back to Anurag. While you, of course, make that point, Professor, let me ask you this. If Iran, of course, moves to block or disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, do you see a military response from the Western side as inevitable? Are we in that situation now?
Well, certainly the Strait of Hormuz is incredibly important strategic corridor. A large percentage of the world's oil flows through that. If there is an effort to shut that down, a number of nations would probably feel obliged to try to keep things open, just as many in the international community responded when the Houthis were attacking shipping in the Red Sea. I'm somewhat doubtful that Iran would do that, just since their argument is with Israel, not with the Arab Gulf states, and they recognize that this would be quite provocative. But it really is it's something to consider. It is a dangerous possibility, to be sure. And regarding what I was mentioning earlier, just real briefly.
And Anurag, given the fact that, Yeah, Professor, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the point I was making earlier is that many Israeli strategic leaders realize that even if Iran did develop a nuclear weapon, they wouldn't attack Israel. That would be suicidal. Israel has a huge nuclear deterrent. The policy of Israel and the United States is that it's kind of a nuclear apartheid, that our side can have nuclear weapons, but people we don't like cannot. U.S. and Israel rejected calls for a nuclear weapons-free zone for the entire Middle East, similar to nuclear weapons-free zones you already have in Africa, Latin America, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, Antarctica, South Pacific. Iran and every Arab state's called for a nuclear weapons-free zone, but and again, the attitude is a nuclear apartheid. Only our side gets to have it. And when you have that international law, non-proliferation needs to be consistent, needs to be law-based. It can't be just whoever has the ability to bomb the other should be able to have certain kinds of weapons, because again, that contributes to the possibility of greater war and instability.
Professor, as you also say that, the world is, of course, closely watching this, and there are multiple reactions also coming in. Geopolitically speaking, how are you looking at this pan out and the larger implications of this?
The implications, I'm sorry, of what?
Of the current situation that we're looking at, while we, of course, look at the statements that are being made from both the sides.
Yes. What it looks, to the Iranian, most Iranians do not like their government. It's quite repressive. But remember that Iran, formerly known as Persia, has been a major regional power on and off for over 2,500 years. They are strongly patriotic, strongly nationalistic, and they really don't like being treated like as not having the rights that other countries have, including the right to enrich uranium and have a civilian nuclear program. And so what this does is that it strengthens the clerics, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the oppressive reactionary groups within Iran. I mean, I've been to Iran, recently, and again, people couldn't stop complaining about how much they hate the regime. Yet they're almost all united in believing, hey, we have a right to have a nuclear program just like anybody else. This is unfair that we're being singled out. And again, this just hardens the attitude of the Iranians and strengthens the regime when we should actually be supporting the democratic forces who want to be part of the international community and want to have responsible leadership and want to avoid this kind of a regional war.
As you pointed out, and continue to continue that conversation in terms of statements that came in earlier as well. We'll play that out on our screens with the fact that how we spoke about President Trump as well. In fact, he said on social media that he gave Iran a chance, and rather chance after chance, to make a deal. But was it really diplomacy, a coercion dressed as a deal, Professor?
Exactly. I mean, there already was a deal. A good deal that would have made it physically impossible for Iran to build a nuclear weapon, and Trump destroyed that. It took almost a decade of posturing, 2 years of heavy negotiations. I spoke with the then Iranian Foreign Minister, Javad Zarif, and he talked about he had no less than 50 meetings with Secretary of State John Kerry, going over line by line. And the idea that Trump could say, oh, I'm going to come in and make a better deal, which was very one-sided, and even a moderate Iranian government would have a hard time accepting, and then saying, oh, because you didn't accept what the U.S. and Israel demanded of you, therefore Israel has a right to go to war. That's not how negotiations work. That's not how arms control works. That's not how diplomacy works.
Okay. And Anurag, getting you quickly in as far as markets again, gold has become the crisis hedge again, in fact. Is the current move a reflection of real fear or just short-term positioning, in your opinion?
So, Nivenita, look, gold has been on the run since the Ukraine war. And if you look at and I think this is where probably a strategic mistake was made by United States. Well, fully claiming that I might be ignorant about it too. But the mistake was when they seized Russian assets of 300 billion. The point is, rest of the world starts thinking, well, our assets could be seized too, depending on, when the United States likes or doesn't like a particular move of that government. Now, all these central banks, Brazil, China, India, other emerging markets, they started to buy gold in bulk quantities. So today, if $100 of gold is produced, about $20 of that is now being bought only by these central banks. So that created that additional thirst with that limited supply, which created a spike in gold prices. I don't think it's going to last. Look, there have been periods of uncertainty, notably, when 81, somewhere around 81, 82, where gold touched the peak, and the next 20 years it spent just getting down from that hill. For 20 years, imagine, right? So the point is, gold has its way of spiking, in the times of uncertainty, but eventually, ultimately, it's just a metal. It has only as much value as the other guy is willing to pay for it. It doesn't work for, it's an asset if the world believes it's an asset. Otherwise, it's not, right? So I'm not a believer so much in gold. People say it's last 30, 40 years, it has produced 8 to 9% returns. Well, that's fine. Right. But as the world becomes more safer, well, the returns will moderate. And I think certainly the last.
I have to interject you for the moment because I'm afraid we're running short of time. But in a nutshell, you've, of course, put your perspective as to how you're looking at it in terms of the markets. And Professor Stephen, thank you very much for also joining us this evening on ET Now with how you are also looking at this particular situation. That's many times going to tell us to how this is going to unravel. But for the moment, we leave it at that because we're shifting our focus to big development that has come in as far as the horror of the Air India tragedy is